Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the long and winding Royal Road. My name is W.H. Park, and of course, this is the show that looks at the greatest era of in-ring professional wrestling, in my opinion, at least, and that's 1990s All Japan Pro Wrestling. And joining me today on a very special episode is someone who does a great podcast, not about All Japan or New Japan or anything, but Dragon Gate professional wrestling with a former guest on the show, Case Low. It's Mike Spears from the Open the Voice Gate podcast. Mike, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like we've talked about doing this kind of episode for a while, and I'm glad that now we are committing and doing this, and you complete the Open the Voice Gate. I don't know if it would be like the biathlon. I mean, one episode about Kabashi, the other episode for Hansen. It kind of works out. Somehow Case and I managed to work this out in a way that we managed to kind of do our own little thing. But I'm so stoked to be here and talk about All Japan in the 90s and Stan Hansen, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
So Mike has revealed it. He's stolen my thunder here, but that's okay.
Sorry.
No, not at all. It's all good. It's all good. We are doing the return of the biography episodes. Of course, we have done Misawa, Kawada, Kobashi, Taue, and of course, the unofficial fifth pillar, Jun Akiyama. We did a biography episode on him. Today, I would say, in my opinion, the sixth pillar, more than even Jumbo, who I love dearly, but I would say maybe more important to the four pillars and their development as main event guys through the ranks of All Japan Pro Wrestling is one Stan Hansen. What would you say about that, Mike?
I think that when you look at the four pillars and then when you are just like how this promotion was like, and I think it's something that with Hansen, he filled this role like within especially this era, it was so important to have natives versus foreigners. And you had Stan Hansen, who, with the exception of the guy who broke him in the business, I think, and maybe those who come lately, the most important foreigner, maybe I'm blanking on his name right now, maybe Destroyer, but like he's like the most important foreigner, I would say. Like so like it is something that's natural that he would be the sixth pillar, because he is someone that like not only like was throughout the 90s with All Japan, it is something that when you like look at someone within pro wrestling, I think like Stan Hansen is very singular in a lot of ways, especially in the path he took. And I think that he is, if not one of the more fascinating kind of people of that era, just because how distinct he was and just like with how things played in with the other pillars. I just think he was just phenomenal. And to be frank, there's not wrestlers like Stan Hansen anymore. And It is something that he talks about, and it was a point he made like 12 years ago, and it's very, and even with like how wrestling is nowadays, with like the greatest like we have more wrestling available to us than ever, but we don't have a Stan Hansen. We don't have someone who is that kind of presence. Like I don't even know like who you could even compare to, or someone who fills like a similar role to that. It just doesn't exist anymore.
I'm sure one John Bradshaw Layfield would like to think he did that, but he did not. He was more like a J.R. Ewing meets Ted DiBiase kind of a thing, and the only thing that he really lifted from Stan Hansen was his lariat, but not even his lariat can't compare to Stan Hansen's. But before we get into Stan Hansen, let's talk about you, Mike. You are, of course, very well known for your love for Dragon Gate, and like the most comprehensive, the most well like researched podcast about the company. If anybody wants to get into Dragon Gate, you have to listen to Mike here and Case Low on Open the Voice Gate over at the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. And trust me, like sometimes I dip in and out, and it's like, okay, I got to get refreshed on what's happening. I just go, okay, gonna listen to several episodes of Open the Voice Gate, and I'm all caught up. So definitely, please go check it out. We'll get the plugs in, of course, at the end of the episode. But Mike, what is your history, your fandom for this company, All Japan Pro Wrestling, of this era?
It is something that I think they now called me an elder millennial. Like I kind of came into wrestling at a time that like I was mentioning about like the greatest time for consumption. But when you think about like late 90s, early 2000s, if you're a teenager, it's a lot of magazines, and you see these great photos, especially like the After mags. I remember, and this is a very short-lived magazine, and probably for very good reason, called Wow. That
I
I would
remember. Wow.
always, yeah, but it always had like the paper was always like shiny, and it was always really good quality, and the photos were always super vivid with what they did. And I would always remember, like, I would flip through it, and I'd always turn to the Japan portion. Like, even before I had any concept of what wrestling was across the world, I was just intrigued by it. And I would like see these photos of like Kawada and Misawa and Hansen, and it was just something that would just seem so different from what I was seeing. So as I got older, went away to college, got file share services, like, and like how a lot of people were able to, I was able to like find out and seek it out. And it's something that I just find Baba's booking and the way that All Japan kind of presents itself, especially like during those times, as and we talk about all the time on Open the Voice Gate about talent development. It is something that I think that Dragon Gate really has done a emphasis of the last 6 or 7 years, really putting the talent and talent development at the forefront as they are encountering issues that All Japan would counter with Tenryu and SWS, and having to have like this sudden elevation there. I see so many like similarities in a way, but I think that even with what Dragon Gate's at right now and how they managed to crank out all these talented wrestlers in the middle of COVID of all things, I just the way that All Japan just like kind of called to me. And then as the older I got and the more I was able to have like the resources, like when you're a college kid, you're not tape trading. You're not able to do that. But like going back and then being able to go like, oh, all right, I'm able to go get the Carnival from 90 and be able to sit down in like my dorm room as like my roommate is going, what is this guy doing? And I'm just like, no, I'm just going through 1990 a Champion Carnival right now in 2005. Like, don't worry about how I'm making this like play, and there's not any like anyone speaking English. This is not about you. But it's one of those things I just have always found myself drawn to, and I just think that it's just such a fascinating and like idyllic time in wrestling in a lot of ways.
For sure. So let's talk about Stan Hansen and your first exposure to him. So for myself, my first exposure to Stan Hansen was actually through the AWA, because we would get like, so the Montreal promotion that the Rougeos worked for,
right,
and that Dino Bravo worked for, and where like early Haku worked there, and they had a relationship with the AWA, and of course Rick Martel, who was AWA champion when I started watching wrestling, he was also the booker of the Montreal promotion, and so like they would broadcast AWA matches. So of course one of the matches that they broadcast was Rick Martel versus Stan Hansen. This is my first time ever seeing Stan Hansen. I was actually already familiar with Martel, and I'm like, this is a really good match. And then this is of course the match that Martel loses the AWA World title to Stan Hansen via the Boston Crab, where Stan Hansen is in the turnbuckle, and to prevent Martel from breaking the Boston Crab, he keeps putting his head against the second turnbuckle, unbeknownst to the dumbass referee who's not even bothering to check what Stan Hansen is doing in the corner. And this is it. And then for the portion of the time that I'm able to have access to AWA wrestling, Stan Hansen is the AWA World Champion. So for me, he's synonymous with that title in a lot of ways, which is ironic considering his history with that title. But that's my first encounter with him as a teenager. And then later on, like, he doesn't really wrestle that much in the United States. Really, most of his time is spent in Japan, particularly for Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling. And then you hear his name here and there. You read the aftermags. Oh, he's wrestling over there. He's a champion over there. He's teaming with Ted DiBiase and Danny Spivey. Oh, they're wrestling over there sometimes. So it's not until I start tape trading and I'm like, okay, what's the big deal about this All Japan stuff? Who's this Misawa guy? Who's Kawada? And then, oh shit, Stan Hansen's working here. And then I'm watching Stan Hansen and I'm like, oh my God, he is fucking amazing. He's even better than he was in the 80s because the quality of opponents he's having in All Japan is just like nothing against Rick Martel. I think Rick Martel is awesome, but
I
like
think he's underappreciated in a
oh
lot of
yeah,
ways.
but you get Masawa Kawada, Kobashi Taue. It's like we just going to another level, right? But and the style, of course, is much different than the 80s. So, and I'm just like, how old is this guy now in this era? But he looks really he's probably one of those wrestlers that looks older than he actually is. Like John Tenta.
Oh yeah, and especially like given like his look and like how he would like present himself. I mean, like if you put a photo of like AWA era with like the with the I forgot what it's called, the plate belt. The prisoner belt, the one that they like made there. If you like take a look at him, you could guess somewhere between 35 to 60. Like, and it's
Yes.
just something that like he also carries himself in a certain way that like whenever I see a photo of Stan Hansen, like I think he was just at Kobashi's Fortune Dream show that just happened. Like he did an appearance at it, and it's like, oh yeah, he looks like he's 90, and it's just like, no, Stan Hansen's actually 65 or he's 70 now. He just like it's like something I think about him and like the kind of style and like West Texas that just ages people. And
The mustache too.
oh, the mustache, tremendous mustache that do
So,
that as well.
yes. But for me, it's like, okay, I'm watching his matches here in Japan. And like, honestly, like if you were to ask me, WH, what's your top 5 wrestlers of all time? He's in there. He's always in there. Like other people can move up and down. He's always in like the top 5. Sometimes he's at number 3. Sometimes he's moved. Depends my mood that week. You know what I'm saying, Mike?
Oh yeah. It's something that like I feel kind of bad about it in a way that like my favorite wrestler of all time is Terry Funk. I'm a Terry truther, but like when I think about who is cooler, I just think about the guy who takes the rope and runs through the crowd and just does not stop. And the way that it maybe like as a memory for me, like I think probably the first match I saw was the Vader match, and it was something that like as like the being of the age that you would go on LimeWire, Kazaa, whatever, and you're like searching for things and you like see this and you see this guy do this, he almost looks superhuman in a way. And it's just like, no, he is just this guy from West Texas, from Knox City of all places, like a really small town. But I know that he always claims from Bulger. They don't play actual like 11-man American football in Knox City. It's that small of a town. They play 6-man football. But like it kind of like generates like that kind of tough person like living out in the Panhandle in West Texas. And in a way, like even more so than Terry Funk, who like has Double Cross Ranch. Whenever I think of like Texas wrestler, Stan Hansen is the Texas wrestler.
Yes. Well, I think it helps that he wears the boots.
Oh yeah,
he has the chaps. He has the vest. He has the hat. Like Terry Funk has all those, but he's like also there's a period of his career where he's like he's in his ECW era. That's very synonymous
the
with
cutoff, the cutoff shirt.
Yeah, and he's got the striped tights and stuff, the long boys. Whereas Stan Hansen, he also wears his cowboy boots, his cowboy wrestling boots. And Terry Funk never really did that. I feel like Dusty Rhodes has the cowboy boots, and the Barry Windham has the same style of cowboy boots. Magnum TA, all those people I think of them. I don't know if Magnum TA is a Texas wrestler though, like Windham and Rhodes and Hansen are, but you know what I mean? Like I associate those style of boots whereas Terry Funk was like just more regular wrestling boots.
And Terry changed a lot, like as you were saying, the ECW era versus like the Funk Brothers, and like this, like he was someone that I think that one of the reasons I'm a Terry person. I know this isn't a Terry show, but one of the reasons I'm a Terry person is just like he was able to evolve in the times, and I think that's such an interesting comparison to Stan Hansen, who the same Stan Hansen that retired in 2000 was pretty much the same Stan Hansen that showed up and walked out of New Japan and appeared at the Tag League Finals, like that tour. Like it's the same person across those 18 years.
I think the thing we'll talk about, we're going to get into actually talk about his personal history and getting into Japan and stuff. Don't worry, folks. But one thing that really stands out about Stan Hansen is that the business changes around him. He doesn't really change that much. In fact, I think he thrives where he's like, "Oh, we can hit each other really harder and like it's expected." That's what's expected of him in Japan. He talks about this in his book. It's like people say, "Oh, I was stiffing them or whatever." It's like, "No, this is what people pay to see is me like wrestling really hard and hitting you really hard and people want to see me get hit hard in return." And that's if you can't deal with that, working here in Japan, that's the market expectation, then don't work here. And I think it's really interesting that he really thrives with this evolution of the style of wrestling in the 90s in all Japan with Masawa Kobashi and Kawada and Taue. And then you include the other, foreigners that wrestled there, Dr. Dusty Williams, Terry Gordy. It's like, okay, these guys, like they live for that style. And I think Stan Hansen also lived for that style. And he just like, but he's all like you're saying, Mike. He's the guy that like wrestled like Lex Luger for the WCW United States title and to beat him for that, and then for like a short period of time in WCW. And then he's also the same guy that's having these getting dropped on his head by Kawada and Masawa and stuff like that, and just tearing them apart. And it's amazing to see that dichotomy. He's also the same guy that quote unquote broke Bruno Sammartino's neck, in the 70s. So
And
it's amazing what a career he has had. And like this is, if I'm starting to gush early, it's because like I love talking about Stan Hansen.
it's something that I think that part of Stan Hansen is, and he talks a lot about this, is the football background. And I think that he was someone that when we think about like how wrestlers nowadays come about, it's usually okay, they watch it and then they find a school or they post clips on Twitter and YouTube, they get signed and they go from there. He kind of was the person that was like West Texas A&M at that time was like this place that was like a performance center. Before the performance center, you had all of these incredible wrestlers just come through there, and the way that football was at that time lends yourself to like after you're done with football, like going into and being in a very competitive, hard-hitting aerobic. And I think that's something really important about talking about Stan Hansen is for a guy who was 290 pounds, he made a point of being constant motion. And I think that that comes from that kind of style of Texas football of that time. And I think that like it kind of produced that if you look at a lot of the people that you've mentioned and a lot of like all Japan foreigners that come through there, I mean, you could almost start with the West Texas A&M like alumni list, and you'll come across like, of course, the Funks, Bruiser Brody. I know Duncombe Jr. did tours, but he did not play for West Texas. His dad did though, and Ted DiBiase. And it's something that when you like look at the people who've really kind of thrived in all Japan, and you look at for the foreigners, you kind of have to look at like this one like small college that all these people started playing football at, and they're right next to Amarillo. That's the thing about this college is that it's I think 20 minutes drive from Amarillo, which is the Funks territory, and it just kind of was like a natural way in a way. And I think that like Stan Hansen in his own way was like the perfect example of going from football into wrestling and then finding the style of wrestling that best fits you, because I don't think that there's a lot of like former athletes that hit that transition and find and really like take to it in a way that like Stan Hansen did.
Okay, so he is born John Stanley Hansen II. His birthday is August 29th, 1949. He was trained by Dory Funk Sr., Dory Funk Jr., and of course, the youngest brother, Terry Funk. Terry's the youngest, right? Of the two.
Yeah, no, I think Dory was 4 or 5 years older than him.
So he's discovered like what is it? Like they see him like playing, right? Football.
Yeah, it was something that they were alumni coming to like see them play football, and it's like, who is this Stan Hansen guy? He was like the middle linebacker for this team that was not necessarily a good football team, but they saw him, and he was a football player that he attempted to make the NFL for 2 teams. He tried for the Chargers, was one of them, and after that, he decided to go back and finish his degree and start teaching, and then Terry Funk says, hey, you can make a lot more money than teaching wrestling, and it was off to the races from there.
I think the story in his book is like he goes to meet the Funks. They say, yeah, you can make like at the time I think it was like $300 or
Right. Yeah.
$400, and he's like, oh, I'm barely making 500 a month, and they're laughing at him. They're like, no, that's a week. As a professional wrestler, if you're successful at it, you can make $300 a week. And he's like, whoa, okay, I'm quitting my job. No, they were like, don't quit your job right now. Finish the semester of teaching. Come back to us. We will train you. We will break you in. And that's what happens. They break him into the business. They get him a lot of dates. I think he starts off with in the Amarillo territory.
Yeah.
He makes his debut in 1973, working for the NWA Western States Territory out of Texas, and also doing dates for Championship Wrestling from Florida, which I believe is that the Mike Graham
Yep. Yeah, that was Mike
territory
Graham at that time.
Right. So he's working two of the more famous territories in the United States in the 70s, and really getting his feet wet there, as starting off as a jobber for the most part, getting more experience. He also before he starts wrestling, he meets a guy by the name of Frank Goodish when he's and this is like his first impression in his book is like, wow, this guy is kind of kind of strange. What's up with this dude? But then, of course, Frank Goodish famously becomes the wrestler known as Bruiser Brody. They start teaming in, I believe, the Tri-State Wrestling promotion, that Leo McGurk promotion.
Yeah, I think Tri-State is what they called, because Leo McGurk had two different portions. It was the Oklahoma into Louisiana, Arkansas, and then the Gulf area, Louisiana, throughout there. I know that it was something that was like a weird split territory in a way, but it was like Tri-State, which I believe was the Oklahoma, Louisiana part.
So, of course, his partnership, both in the ring, but also backstage, was like probably the most enduring and probably most important relationship in his professional career, because I really feel that Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen were like kindred spirits in how they looked at business, right?
Oh yeah,
they are both famous for like okay, we're not going to take any shit from promoters. Like if you want to deal business with us, you understand first Japan is the most important thing to us. If you cannot handle that we price priority to Japan for Stan Hansen, primarily to Giant Baba, for Bruiser Brody, to basically anyone who will pay him. Like he wasn't as loyal to Baba, to himself, but that is a mindset that they developed together. I feel, and it comes through in his book that and this will come into later when we talk about his run in the AWA and his relationship with Vern Gagne. But and they also form one of the most formidable and hard-hitting and fearsome tag teams of all time, because if you are a wrestler and you're staring across the ring and you see Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody as a shoot, you're probably like, shit, they're gonna beat the fucking shit out of me.
And when you think about it, you have like these two guys that I feel like in a way that this is, if we're going to make the movie of Stan Hansen's life, you really pick it up as he's at West Texas A&M. He walks in, meets Frank Goodish, and Frank Goodish, Bruiser Brody, is kind of, in a lot of ways, is his partner throughout life and throughout the career there. And I think there's like a hell of a movie there between those two. But it's something whenever I think about Hansen and Gordy, I'm going to try to control my Dragon Gate references on a non-Dragon Gate show here. But there's a reason why Dragon Gate always has Stalker Chikawa be Stan Hansen. He always does like Stan Ichikawa Hansen, or if he's doing a tag team, he'll be Hansen, someone else's Brody. They are just such a presence, and it's something that I find Bruiser Brody fascinating. I think that it is something that when you have this West Texas guy meet up with this guy who, I mean, Frank Goodish on the side was a sports writer, incredibly intelligent, incredibly well-spoken guy. They completed themselves, and it is something that I really find fascinating. I do really think that there is probably a Hansen Brody movie. If someone wants to put forth the money, I'll get a treatment out for that. I think it could be really good.
I mean, if they're making a movie with the Von Erichs, you can make a movie about Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody.
Oh yeah, and you could pretty much use the same sets. I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to use the guy from The Bear in this, so it's not like we're going to be able to share a cast with it. But I really think that, and I mean, like, there's no more like one of the more tragic stories right there between like those two, and just the way that like Hansen, like as we'll get into it later, I think in the way that like, it's good that he had All Japan and he had the four pillars around him in that 90s run because it comes so fresh off of the death of Brody. And I think that in a lot of ways, like you have those phases of his career and his life. And it is something that with like with Frank Goodish, Bruiser Brody, it starts back in 75, but it really like starts like back in college for them.
Yeah, I mean, let's continue with the Brody partnership thread here, Mike. Like, because I think it's very telling because, like you say, so Stan Hansen gets his first tour with in Japan with All Japan in 1975 via being booked through the Funks, who were the kind of booking agent for a lot of for most of the foreign talent that would come from America to Japan. Because Baba had a great relationship with the Funk family, he would send Jumbo Tsuruta to them to get trained by them, and so it's like so here like Bruiser Brody's making his name in Japan as well. Here's Abdullah Butcher making his name in Japan as well, and here comes Stan Hansen, who makes a pretty great impression, particularly because at this early start of his Japanese career, because he's got this association with Bruiser Brody, who is probably the most unique, I can't say most unique because you do have Abdul the Butcher, who's probably, I'm going to say maybe the most unique guy to ever wrestle in Japan who wasn't Japanese.
Yeah, you had like this time where you had Abby, you had Bruiser Brody, and then you had Tiger Ali Singh. So you had like and then you have Hansen there. It's just like, how would anyone like go to a show in like 70s, 80s Japan and like not be terrified that their umbrella is going to get absolutely wrecked every single time?
And if we take a look at like kind of the talent that Baba was booking before the 80s, as far as foreign talent goes, it's Dick Bayer, the Destroyer, of course, one of the most famous wrestlers of all time in Japan. You have the Funk Brothers, who were beloved in all Japan because Baba really pushed them really hard, and of course, natural charisma of Terry Funk, and Dory Funk's such a great wrestler. But then of course, like he also had a great relationship with Bruno Sammartino, who he booked in All Japan. But then you get to the 90s, and here comes these two guys who are like not of the mold of Dick Bayer, not of the mold of even the Funk Brothers or Terry Funk by himself, or Bruno Sammartino. Or like who else is getting booked there? Mil Mascaras, I guess, right? Is getting booked there. Here is like two wild men from Texas, Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen, and I think they set the template for the wild brawlers who are, of course, now who Baba wisely put in the ring a lot of the times against the Funk Brothers because it was such a great contrast and it got these guys over as heels. But like the great thing about wrestling is like if you're a great heel, eventually the fans are going to turn you and you're going to become a beloved baby. I don't think they're baby faces, but like my God, they are so popular. And to a point you made earlier, Stan Hansen, I'm going to say, as someone who lived in Japan, Stan Hansen is the most famous foreign wrestler to ever wrestle in that country. And I'm not going to say the most popular. I think he is one of the most popular. I don't know if he's the most popular, but he's the most famous. Like that, he penetrates
easily
pop culture more than Terry Funk, more than, I don't know. Like people say, oh, is he? You know what people would say to me, Mike? Oh, is Kenny Omega on that level? I'm like, come on, are you serious? No,
that is like such like, and it's something that for me, like I always try to contextualize things. Like people have to realize that like when you pick up like manga, you'll still see someone who is drawn like Stan Hansen to this day. Whenever they need like a big, tall American person, they're probably going to look like Stan Hansen. Like that's a certain kind of like cultural permeation that Kenny Omega just does not even have the opportunity to even glance.
I would have people, Mike, like in my job, people when they learn that I love wrestling, professional wrestling.
Gosh.
Oh, you Protas ski desu ka? Yes, I love Protas. And they'll ask me what I like, and I was like, oh, Zenihon Perez, you know, from
Mhm.
Baba-san. Oh yeah, Giant
Yeah,
Baba,
yeah.
yeah. And then they'll like inevitably they'll mention Baba, and then they'll mention next. I shit you not, they'll mention Stan Hansen, and then they'll do
Oh, yeah.
the youth, and then you know Lariat, and then they know the Lariat, they know the youth, his call, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
No one
Sunrise's
else.
theme. Yeah.
Yes, no one else.
It
No one ever brought up like other foreign wrestlers. No fucking Hulk Hogan. None like that. It's Stan Hansen. This is people who never watched wrestling. This is people who were born after Stan Hansen had retired. would
Oh, yeah.
ask me about Stan Hansen. I'm like, how do you know Stan Hansen? Because he is the archetype from which, you know, like you think of when you think of an American wrestler is Stan Hansen. Now, like 20 years from now, might be someone different.
Right.
Like, but I think Stan Hansen will always permeate, you know, Japanese wrestling culture, and to a large extent the wider pop culture, and like, you know, like he's imprinted on Japanese culture in general.
I feel like it's someone that like he does talk about in the book that he like became like contemporaries was Randy Bass. Randy Bass is someone for people who do not know Japanese baseball. Randy Bass was like the first big like foreign star who just like was raking. He like was setting. He was no Sadaharu O, but he was someone who was threatening his records, and he became like this figure that if he stayed in Japan, he probably would have become like one of like those really culturally like permeating people like Stan Hansen. He instead became a politician in Oklahoma. But I feel like that you have these like archetypes that, at least for like when you think about like Hansen, like 80s into 90s, the Japanese miracle still happening towards like this wrestling in at like its height at that era, leading into the 90s and the rebuild after SWS. He's there, and he is the one front and center. Like I somehow got a copy of Bruiser Brody Memorial Program from Budokan. I was gifted it, and I was like, this is insane. I like flipped through it, and front and center, like other than like the photos, of course, of like roster members going through it, the car, it's like an article for Brody, huge photos of St. Hansen all over it. It's just imprinted on it. And I don't know if there's a way that it could happen that a foreigner can like even be in a position to kind of have the cultural impact that Stan Hansen has.
I mean, one of my kind of grails as a wrestling collectible is the famous, I think it's either Gong or Weekly Perez, of Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody dressed as samurai.
Oh, that's such a cool picture. It is the best. That was like a forum profile photo for like whenever you would see that on a message board in like the early 2000s, you knew that person knew what was up.
Yeah.
Like you did not mess with someone who had Samurai, Stan, and Bruiser.
So I'm gonna find that picture one of these days, and like in Totokan or somewhere, and I'm gonna snap it up. I'll tell you that right now, Mike. So getting back to like his history, we're just jumping all over the place because like you know that's like Stan Hansen's wrestling style.
Oh yeah,
jumping up all over the place. So
yeah, he's going to throw you outside the ring. We're going to kind of
right.
meander a little bit.
You ever see that match he does with? I think he's teaming with Gordy, and something happens, and he goes fucking crazy, like legit crazy. He's so angry. He yells at Baba.
Yeah.
He's destroying the ring. I forget someone like potatoes him, and he is so pissed. I forget. I might have been Tenru. I forget exactly.
I feel like that it was maybe it was Gordy and Hansen versus Revolution. Like I do remember Tenru being involved at that time. I don't know if it was another who he was tagging with at that match, but like I feel like Hansen was like notorious for being the one that would just like suddenly in the middle of the match flip out and go like run in the crowd.
Oh, you know, it was Asahara Hara.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
So if it's it was that, and then he just goes nuts, and like they just let him, like the crowd just runs away from him, and he's like destroying the ring keeper's table, everything. It's out there on YouTube. I highly recommend watching it if you want to see how legit, like, don't fuck with Stan Hansen.
Terror.
This is yes.
How did Baba not get kicked out of more buildings because of him? Like you always talk about, it is Baba. Like everyone's just like, oh no, it's Baba. But like you think about like because of Beat Takeshi and Vader, the Sumo Hall kicked out New Japan for years. How did they not get like Stan Hansen like tearing down something? Like and like get expelled from Sling. Baba must be really good. Must have been really
My
great
God,
at smoothing that
dude,
over.
he got Terry Gordy out of Japan for drug possession. So that's
Better than Paul McCartney there.
there you
Did
go.
better than that than
You
him.
know, so he makes his debut in '75 for All Japan. He would also do some tours for New Japan between the years of '77 and '81, before making a very shocking jump back to All Japan, aligning himself, being basically he finishes a show for All Japan, takes a taxi across to I think probably in Sumo Hall, New Japan, I think, or Korakuen, and he's taking a cab over to fucking Budokan, and he shows up in the corner of Bruiser Brody and Jimmy Snuka, who are taking on the Funks, and it's crazy. It's like what people are going absolutely apeshit because they're like, what the fuck is Stan Hansen doing here? And then it becomes a big melee between like basically Hansen and Brody against the Funk Brothers. Jimmy Snuka's in there, but he's kind of an afterthought, really, if you watch the video.
Yeah.
But it is, and then basically he is an All Japan guy from this point on.
I just think it's so like that is something like that jump, and it is something that I like The Last Outlaw, his autobiography, like the way that he the steps that he made to make that jump, I don't think like really get enough credit. Like doing like secret meetings in Dallas Fort Worth International Airport with Baba, flying in just to have that meeting with Stan Hansen and keeping it under wraps. Like it, you can't have moments like this. Like what would be like the biggest thing that would, I don't think that there's a way that someone could jump that way from promotions nowadays, or be able to do it and it be such like an organic shock when it happened. And it's one of the cooler things. Just getting the footage and be able to see just like the crowds just slowly start to notice that it's Stan Hansen with Brody. And of course they know the history between Hansen and Brody, and then the melee. It is one of those like a lot of like one of those like true like first like, at least to me, like one of those like great angles that you would see that Baba at that time, not necessarily big on that, but like just having a guy be a second and completely destroying a tag match. Perfect way to kick off the next 19 years.
Yeah, and it just sets a tone for what Stan Hansen is in that company, what he's going to be in that company. That being said, he doesn't, completely divorce himself from New Japan. He famously returns for the 1990 Super Fight in Tokyo Dome show on the February 10th to face Big Van Vader for the IWGP Heavyweight title. Big deal. It's like, oh my God, the top, foreign guy in All Japan is facing the top foreign guy at the time in New Japan.
Oh yeah.
And this is of course the famous match that where, because Stan Hansen has very poor eyesight, he hits, poor Leon White too hard, knocks his eye out of its socket, and Leon has to push it back in and keep his eye shut to make sure it doesn't fall out. And then they just beat each other up for the remainder of the match. It goes to a double DQ, but it's one of the most famous matches of Stan Hansen's career is this match with Vader. And I think also adds to his mystique, and this is like, this is 1990. So he's still got another 10 years left in his career wrestling in All Japan.
I think that like I talked about, the first match I saw probably was Super Fight, but I think it was like one of those things that the first thing I think a lot of people found out about Stan Hansen was, oh yeah, he knocked out Vader's eye in Japan. And it was almost like a schoolyard tale of like a big bully. It's like, oh yeah, no, my dad could beat up your dad thing. And then you find the footage and it's like, oh wow. And it's not just about, okay, this one lariat forearm hit him in the orbital. No, this is an absolute war that happens. And then it continues from that.
Well, it's interesting about that. Sorry to cut you off there. Like,
go right ahead.
What's interesting about the relationship between Stan Hansen and Vader is that, Leon White got his start in the AWA. He was a baby bull, Leon White, and he's immediately, put in there with Stan Hansen, who, from what I could gather, like, I don't really remember watching matches, but I remember reading the after mags and stuff like that. So of course they're all kayfabe and stuff, but it's like basically what they're even saying in kayfabe is that, Stan Hansen ate this guy up, and just like, because Leon White in his first year of wrestling didn't have really any skills because of his size and like his football background, I think too, right?
Oh
That
yeah,
he
he
gets
was
the
a
big push by
former
Vern.
LA Ram, I believe.
Yeah. So, but like, and then years later, here he is. He's now repackaged as Van Vader. He's like the most pushed guy in Japan, who's not, like fucking Shinya Hashimoto or fucking Jumbo Tsuruta. And now
Or
and
Inoki himself.
or Inoki himself, and he's getting in there with Hansen, and like it's like, wow, if you know the history of Vader as Leon White and like and his relationship with Stan Hansen professionally, it's like it's really cool seeing that match and like how intense and like it's kind of a coming out party almost for Vader. It's kind of like Stan Hansen. The role he serves for like the four pillars a lot, he serves kind of as for Vader here as well as the gatekeeper, and like the fact that Vader survived this encounter, even legit getting his eye knocked out of its socket, I think is something that really helped Vader as well.
Oh yeah, and then when you look at what Vader went on like immediately right after that, so Super Fight in 1990, that's getting into Vader's best run in WCW right after that. And I think that when you look at Leon White as a wrestler, and especially like the fact that there's not a lot to him for such a long period of time, I think you look at his series with Hansen, and Hansen's the archetype. Vader is kind of the evolution in a way that I could see I know that, of course, with the Noah split and basically everyone leaving, that it completely changes your hierarchy. But I could see a world where it is basically Hansen handing the ball off of his role to Vader in 2000 and going with that. And if that is a world that would have existed, I think that it would have worked out really well for the two of them. Like, imagine that time period and having like Stan Hansen, like this great big man tag team wrestler, give him one of the other best big men of all time and Big Van Vader, and put him in a tag league. I think that it would have been so fascinating. Like that's something that just butterfly effects, sliding doors did not happen, but
Well, I
there's
mean,
a
they did
lot
have that
there.
run together when Vader does leave the WWF and goes to All Japan Pro Wrestling. He is
Oh yeah,
teamed with Hansen and stuff like that. But I understand what you're saying, like where Hansen, like, okay, I'm winding down. I'm gonna
right, yeah,
pass a torch to Vader. Vader's gonna be me now. It's gonna be the new
exactly.
me in this company. And if the split never happens, I mean, there's a lot of things like I could,
Oh
you
sure.
know, theorize about what the split never happens. It's like Akiyama, Taiokeya, Omori, and Takayama trying to like elevate themselves to be like the new four pillars and things like that. Like, but Too Cold Scorpio maybe, just becomes a great, like, flying heavyweight wrestler in All Japan and stuff like that.
That would have been interesting. I'm at Too Cold Scorpio and the matches that could have happened into that division. It would have completely like turned it would have turned that division on its head, having just
I mean,
someone like that
he was
change the
tight with
pace.
Vader. So
Right.
he was protected in Noah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and he got over in Noah, like good old Too Cold Scorpio there. So
Oh yeah, because he was the hardcore crown for a while.
yeah, but he was also like GHC tag champions
Yeah.
with Vader, because like they had such a great relationship, which is like, we're on a tangent here, Mike, but that's one of the most interesting friendships I find in wrestling is Big Van Vader and Too Cold Scorpio being
Yeah,
legit
that's the one.
friends.
Yeah, that's the one that you're wondering, like at Waffle House, what are they talking about? Like when they're away from the ring, like is it something that their music tastes are like super in common? Like
Who knows?
who I would love to be a fly on that Waffle House landing.
Their mutual hatred of Kip Fry, maybe. Who knows? I don't know.
I mean, they would have been in good company.
Exactly. I mean, they were in WCW together, so that's probably where they, and he brings him over, right? I guess. But also with the Hansen Vader match, there's also the very famous match he also has with Hulk Hogan at the New Japan All Japan WWF Wrestling Summit show at the Tokyo Dome on April 13th, 1990. Hogan wins that match, of course. He's not doing any jobs. But, like, it's interesting because, like, you always get the feeling, like, reading Hansen's book, that he likes Terry Boella. He likes Hulk Hogan. He has, like, a lot of respect for him. And then you feel like there's also kind of a mutual respect that, Stan Hansen is one of those guys that actually Hulk Hogan respects as well. And so, like, they're able to have this match. But again, it's something that's like, okay, here's Stan Hansen. He's having a match with the most famous wrestler probably still at the time across the world in Hulk Hogan. And it's at this massive show at the Tokyo Dome that's like unheard of. New Japan and All Japan, forget it. It's like, wow, I can't believe that's happening. But also throw in the WWF.
And it's something that like you really do get the impression that like big takeaway of Hansen's book is that he is a businessman. He will tell you he is a businessman. He will remind you that. And I would not think that him and Terry Bollea would be such good friends. But then like the way that Hansen at least describes himself, I would say that there's something of like, oh, at the end of the day, Hansen wants to make money and go home. And he wants to support Baba. Like those are his three motivations. And I can see a kinship there. And then especially with how Hogan was and the relationship that, I mean, like essentially when Hansen leaves New Japan, that gave the position for Hogan to make that step up. And I could see maybe a little bit in somewhere in the huge, massive Hulk Hogan ego that he recognizes that he got a part of that position because of Hansen leaving. And maybe that's why that they were able to have such a interesting friendship, I would say.
I think also like Hansen, like you're saying, Hansen's like, brother, you're not going over, but man, you're going to make a lot of money. Okay, sure. No problem. I don't care.
At the end of the day, Stan Hansen was going like, oh, is this like the best thing for business? Like it is. I'm surprised that we did not see like Stephanie McMahon walk out with like his book because how much it is about the business for him.
Yes, for sure. He
just showing up on Raw with Stan Hansen's book.
Honestly, like if you're a wrestler and you're listening to this and you want to know like how do I conduct myself in wrestling to protect myself, you should read Stan Hansen's book. You should follow the ethos. And I don't say this even like as a joke. I like if you want to protect yourself, you got to follow the ethos of Stan Hansen because this guy had an amazing career and he looked out for himself, but not at the detriment of his main promotion, which was All Japan Pro Wrestling, because he did have loyalty to the company that had loyalty to him. So, there's the thing. Go read The Last Outlaw. It's a great book. Well, maybe we'll have links in the show description for this show. But he would have another match with Vader the same year, June 12th in Fukuoka, losing by DQ, and he would do several tag matches in All Japan, teaming with Riki Choshu, famously another man famous for his lariat, and once with Wild Pegasus Chris Benoit. But like jumping earlier back to his career, I do want to talk about his WWF run, his WWWF run, Mike.
Oh yeah,
he starts there in 1976, working for Vince Sr. And there's something about him. I think he's paired with Classy Freddie Blassie as his manager, or was it the Grand Wizard?
I think he mentions it was Blassie, so I think
it was Blassie. Yeah. So he's with Blassie, and then he starts feuding with like he's the next guy to be fed to Bruno, who is the WWF heavyweight champion at the time. And on April 26th, in the match that they have, Hansen accidentally breaks Bruno's neck by a botched body slam. Essentially, he accidentally drops him on his head. But this is wrestling, so the WWF and Hansen saw a silver lining. Hey, I almost killed the guy, but let's say it's not from a botched body slam, but from the power of my lariat, which is my finisher. And this is where the legend of his lariat takes off, really, I feel, Mike, because like the fucking magazines are like, let's run with it. Okay, yeah. He broke his neck with the lariat, and they just show the picture of like maybe he hit Bruno with the picture, maybe not even from that match. I don't know. But it's like that broke Bruno's neck. Bruno's out for like, like what, 2 months, 3 months,
Which for them, like when they're running MSG every like with their schedule, that is big considering that Bruno is based around MSG and their whole entire model is feed Bruno's opponent, Bruno beat them, bring him the next one. Stan Hansen broke the cycle that they had.
Yes. And Bruno would recover and they would build towards his revenge match in MSG, of course, in a steel cage for the world title. And the attendance for the show is listed as 22,000 people in MSG, which is pretty good.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean,
that's great, right?
And also, I think one of the more fascinating things about this is while this is all happening, like the synchronicity of Stan Hansen, like almost a Forrest Gump kind of person, this feud with Bruno ends up with the showdown at Shea Stadium, which was when Inoki versus Ali was happening in Tokyo. The WWF, as for a closed circuit, they aired it at Shea Stadium. Almost everyone else who had one of these closed circuit things and put on a show around it bombed horribly. However, Stan Hansen and Bruno Sammartino, like they were able to sell like 30,000 seats, tickets to Shea Stadium for that, and for like, and when you like look up the rest of the card, like McMahon really like leaned into this and was able to probably be one of the few people other than the long-term Inoki walk away from the situation pretty happy with what all happened.
Oh, for sure. For sure. He does leave the WWF. He comes back later from 81 to 82 to now the WWF. And he would rekindle his rivalry with Bruno and also start some really cool feuds with Pedro Morales and Bob Backlund. So, it's a really interesting. I like looking at the American career of Stan Hansen, especially in the 70s and early 80s, because it's like, I don't associate him with like the WWF. I don't associate him with working in New York against Bruno, against wrestlers like Pedro Morales or Bob Backlund, but he doesn't. I think it's a really fascinating aspect of his career.
Yeah, because like when you talk about the model of Vincent Kennedy McMahon, it was really based around finding a baby face, hopefully someone like Italian, Hispanic, something that could play into all the different neighborhoods around New York, and then have like other people built up around it. Like having like a big Texan in there did not match up whatsoever with kind of what the rotation was throughout the Northeast. And it's something that like tossing Hansen in there, and he talks about how he felt like such a fish out of water, and him recognizing like, oh, I'm a heel. I always view myself as a heel. I've done the Sammartino feud. What happens after the Sammartino feud? You do the Morales feud. And then after the Morales feud, you're moving down and down. And he was like, I think this is about time for me to move on. No one did that to McMahon's. No one like was willing to do that. Hansen just, he was getting things set up, and he went on down to Georgia, I think, at that time.
Yeah, he gets the call to go, team with and work with one of his legit best friends in wrestling, Ole Anderson. He goes to Georgia Championship Wrestling. He's doing bookings for New Japan at the time, and this is before before 82. And then, of course, that's when he makes the jump to All Japan. And immediately, like he said, like we said, him and Brody in there with the Funks. But also, he's being put in there with Jumbo Tsuruta and Genichiro Tenryu, Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen versus the then teaming Jumbo and Tenryu Dream Team. And it's like they're doing killer business for Baba, and they go to, in 82, they go to the Real World Tag League Finals against the Funks and lose by DQ. This is before like the Baba adopts the like UWFI mode of like clean finishes, and a very different match from like one of my favorite tag matches of all time, which is Stan Hansen and Tenryu teaming against Jumbo Tsuruta and Yoshiaki Yatsu, the Olympics, in I think the 89 tag league finals. It's just amazing.
Such a sick. I like the Olympics. The Olympics were like, I like Yatsu a bit, so I enjoy that Real World Tag League.
If you see this match on YouTube, folks, it's easy to find. What you get, not only do you get this amazing match in its entirety, right? You also get clips from pretty much the entire tag league. And this, my God, what a murderer's row of talent in this tag league. And I won't go into it, but like it's pretty awesome. But like Tenryu and Hansen, what a fucking team, Mike. They were awesome.
So cool. I had like it. Tenryu is such like a interesting guy, just in general. Like the fact that like him and Stan Hansen, and it seems like out of everyone that he like the natives, him and Tenryu became like super close, living in like they lived in the same apartment building in Atlanta, and like they got to know that there, and just like the idea of like Hansen and Tenryu and where they would go to, like such a cool thing, just because you have like Tenryu, who in a lot of ways was a mirror of Hansen. I think that's kind of fair to say, like at least like athleticism, I would say, for a guy of his size.
And also, like, I mean, Tenryu is such a great wrestler, but he's also just an incredible brawler. I
Oh
think
yeah.
more so than, Jumbo is. I would not consider Jumbo to be, brawler type of wrestler, but Tenryu, along with all like he can do everything, but he also great, amazing brawler. Which he can hold his own. Like you watch Tenryu, it's like who can stand toe to toe with Stan Hansen and probably be just as fearsome as him. It's more likely to be Tenryu than it is anyone else in Japan at the time.
And if you think about it, like really like pull it back, Tenryu coming from sumo, like being a very successful sumo at that time, like coming in there, and you think about similarities between like football, American football, and sumo, and like the training regimen. It's like, oh wow, there's a lot more in common with these two guys. So like, no wonder that the two of them just went at it, and were great teaming together too.
Yeah. So, like I said before earlier in the show, like Hansen does have his run with the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, working for Vern Gagne, because at the time, like AWA had a relationship with All Japan, so it was okay for Hansen to do dates for this. Baba was okay with it because like Jumbo had become the AWA World Champion. He famously bought the title from Vern for a run for Jumbo, and then Jumbo loses it to Rick Martel. And then Rick Martel withdraw. This is a nice synchronicity there. Then Jumbo loses it to Martel. Martel loses it to Hansen, and then Hansen gets stripped of it because he won't do the job because he's like, no, like Baba's booked me with this fucking belt on a tour of Japan. Like I can't lose this belt because it's gonna screw up his business, and I take care of him before I take care of you. And he's trying to work it out with Vern Gagne. In his according to his book, but it's like Vern Gagne. It's like, no, I want that belt off of you. I want it back on Bockwinkel. And so famously, he doesn't decide. No, I'm leaving. I'm not going to take. He takes the physical belt with him. They have to give Nick a tag belt and pretend it's the world title. This is where also they do the switch to the new belt that's famous for like being on Kurt Hennig and Jerry Lawler as AWA world champions. But he's showing up in Japan. It's great. Like Hansen's got the physical AWA world title belt. He's defending it, and they're like, you better stop that right now. We're going to sue you. So he says, okay, you send it back to us. So he runs over it with his truck with tire marks on
tractor. It's with his tractor.
With his tractor. It's got tire marks on it, and he mails it back to them. It's great. This is where we talk about Stan Hansen's like, you mess with my business. You try to hurt my relationship with my main business partner, Giant Baba. So this is what I'm going to do to you. And you know what? I take Hansen's, he regrets it. He thinks he could have handled it better, but I take Hansen's side on this completely 100%.
It's something that Hansen, like when we talk about like in business, he's someone that he has a particular set of ethics that he has self-determined that it's family, work, and with work, it is protecting himself and his employer. And he made it very clear, according to his own reporting, that he was not going to job in that way. He was not taking falls. He is protecting himself because his money is made in Japan. And I wonder like if it's something that with him and with Vern, like you have like two completely different kind of just mentalities about what business is. And I wonder if at a certain point it is football versus collegiate wrestling in a way, but if you look at AWA and how much it was based around these former collegiate wrestlers and what Vern was, and that just never was going to work out with the two of them. Just like how, like with like Hansen and Vincent James McMahon, like it just would not work out in any universe.
I also think, Vern being he is AWA, right?
Oh yeah.
So to someone to say no to him is like unheard of. You either leave him like Hogan does, or like you just follow what he says. And like, Stan Hansen and Nick Bockwinkel, I think famously, talks about Hansen and Brody. And he's like, these guys just took care of themselves. I don't respect them because they did not do business for other people. They just did business for themselves in a selfish way, he feels. But Nick Bockwinkel was always very much a company man, very loyal Gagne. So of like what the situation with Hansen and like other things with Bruiser Brody would not sit very well with someone like Nick Bockwinkel. And that's not to say Nick Bockwinkel is wrong. Of course, from his perspective, that's
Oh yeah.
that's not cool. But like you can see both sides of the story. But like I said, I will always side. In most cases, Mike, I will always side with the wrestler on
Oh no.
in situations like this.
Yeah, and it's something that I think with Bockwinkel, like even though he was not technically office, he really was office. Like in the greater scheme of things, of like Case and I always talk about who's in the room versus who's not in the room. Nick Bockwinkel with AWE definitely was in the room no matter what. So I look at it, and it's something that like Hansen, it is very much so that like it's not like, in comparison to Brody, who would be like looking for things to be aggrieved about, or at least that's the way Hansen portrays it, is that sometimes that it might have been his own pessimism and his own paranoia there with him. Stan Hansen, like at least from the way that he presents himself, always was upfront about, hey, I'll do whatever you want to do, but I'm doing what's best for business, and my business is based with Baba, and I'm going to look out for that. And it's something that I think that with him, he's the only person who really was able to say that. And that's another reason why I think he's such like a one-of-one wrestler.
I think it would have been better if like, say Hansen did drop the belt, like, the right way, and to someone in AWA. I think it would have been better if it was to Kurt Hennig.
Oh yeah.
At the time, rather than Nick Bockwinkel again.
Yeah. Especially like Nikki at that time, you're talking about like late 80s, and AWA needed to get onto Hennig. Like, I know that you look at that time, you had Martel, who they really should have done a lot better with, and they should have done a lot better towards Martel. Like, that's a me thing though. But yeah, they were not a company that was looking for that. And I mean, they were caught with their pants down a lot at that time. And at a certain point, if your pants is down all the time, who's the person dropping the pants? It's Vern.
It's Vern. As an aside, a nice little bit of continuity with Rick Martel is that he adopts the Boston Crab as his finisher because of the match with Hansen. It's just great. Like if you watch his stuff in the Can-Am connection with Zinc, and then later on in Strike Force with Tito, they win the tag titles with the Boston Crab, I think, right?
Yeah, I think Strike Force the finish is the crab. The
crab, and it's like, oh, and if you're me, it's like shit. He got that from Hansen. He's like, that's great continuity. And what do you call that? Like it's like a Easter egg or some shit. Like when we talk about wrestling as cinema, which, by the way, just another aside, I hate that whole discourse about wrestling as cinema. It's not fucking cinema. It's fucking wrestling. Anyway.
Yeah. As someone who went to film, who was going to get a doctorate in film studies, no, it's not. If wrestling is not, it is not cinema. Wrestling is a competition that is beautiful. Like,
yes, wrestling at its core, at its best, in my opinion, you can have like drama, you could have like wild gimmicks, but like whether it's All Japan, New Japan, and Dragon Gate, like my favorite matches in Dragon Gate history, then when I was watching Dragon Gate very closely, are the ones that are like, oh my god, this is an amazing athletic contest. Whether it's between 3 different teams of of four guys on each team, or it's for the or it's for the fucking Dreamgate belt or whatever, or it's Mochizuki versus Shima or something like that. It doesn't matter. It's like at its core, wrestling is best when it's a competition. But anyways, I digress. Let's wrap it up with Hansen. I do want to talk briefly 1990 to 1991. He does a very interesting run in WCW. He wins he ends Lex Luger's long-standing United States title reign on October 27th at Halloween Havoc in 1990. He would drop the title back to Luger at in a strap match of all things, and in a Texas strap match, I believe, at Starrcade. And then he leaves because they want him to do this like wacky gimmick with these guys called the Desperados, where he would just be a joke. But if you watch his promos, he's got the chewing tobacco coming out of his mouth. He's half naked. He does this promo famously with Missy Hyatt, where it's just like it's like that's not the Hansen that I'm familiar with. But I kind of like seeing this other version of Hansen that only exists in 1990s WCW, which is complete clusterfuck, and then comparing it to like, oh, the guy who's killing himself and almost killing other people for real in All Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, it's something that so he goes and does WCW at it's such a complicated time like backstage at WCW that I believe it's originally like 90 he's going in that's at the end of an Oli run with the book and and that's right when you're starting to get Turner influence really into it and I I really do like early 90s WCW. It is something that as I've gotten older and get better access to stuff and have the time, like going back and watching, like I've become such a Sting fan, like over the years. Like, and a lot of that is watching like the early 90s stuff there. And I think that if a WCW clusterfuck, like always generally will lean that way. I would have been so interested in seeing what would have happened if there wasn't the whole Desperados thing, if there wasn't Kip Fry, Bill Hurd, all of that, just because like you had like someone that like that was such like an athletic presence as a big man in that promotion when you had Sting right on his ascent. You have Ron Simmons that's just about to reach that too. Cactus Jack coming in through there. Like you could have just like for as much as clap emoji, meaty men slapping meat, you could have like really had a really fun, just like mini division of big guys. And I think Stan Hansen getting a chance at like a real, like do like a 6-month feud with Sting.
Oh my God.
That would have, especially Sting at that time versus Hansen. And because like, if you watch like Sting at that time, like that's really when he's starting to get actually really good. Oh gosh,
he's not afraid. He's not afraid to lay it in and have it laid into him, right?
Yeah,
that's the thing about Sting. He's like, he's not Hogan. He's like, hey, Leon, if you want to fucking hit me, go ahead. Yeah. I'm gonna hit you right back. And Leon's like, no problem, Steve. Let's do it.
Sounds great. Well, I was going to do it anyways. So it's something that WCW run, just in general, 1990, 1991 WCW is. I find it really kind of. Weird,
I mean, you also have the Steiners. You have the Steiners being like the best tag team in the world at the time. When is Gordy and Williams coming in to do their short run in the company?
It's early 91. It's early.
What a time. Dangerous Alliance. My God, what a fucking time. Steamboat comes back. Like this is one of probably my favorite period of Steamboat's career besides his like, Mid-Atlantic run is like in 91. 1991 WCW, fucking fantastic. But again, we digress. One day we'll do a podcast about 1991 WCW.
Let's find a way to get him. Let's find a way to get Stan Hansen in the Alliance and into War Games that year. I feel like we can make it work. Oh my
God, that make anyways. But from this point, from 82 to his last match in 2000, Stan Hansen makes his name, his base of operations in All Japan Pro Wrestling, and this is. 10 leaves, like you talked about, to form SWS. So there's a big vacuum. Okay, Baba's like lost his second biggest native star outside of Jumbo. What's he going to do? His business is going to start fucking falling. Okay, I've got these 4 guys who are, and a bunch of other guys who are surrounding them that I can start pushing and elevating. And they are, of course, Mitsuharu Misawa, Toshiaki Kawada, Ken Kobashi, and Akira Taue. And then later on, of course, young Jun Akiyama. But, like, it's interesting to watch Baba's booking of Misawa and Jumbo because he really, he waits too long. He never gets the Triple Crown passing of the torch from Jumbo to Misawa. The person who ends up doing that is Stan Hansen, the person who is the gatekeeper that all the 4 pillars, even Taue, I think, have to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But especially Kawada, Misawa, and Kobashi, the guy they have to overcome more than anyone else, more than Jumbo, because at the time also Jumbo has his health issues and he's being phased down and he can't do it, right? And because also Baba waited too long. It's now okay, who can I do? Who can I put in this position that I wanted Jumbo to be in to elevate these guys to be the gatekeeper that they have to overcome? It's Stan Hansen. It's Stan Hansen for Misawa. It's Stan Hansen for Kawada. It's Hansen for Ken Kobashi. Especially, I think Kobashi really like overcoming Stan Hansen is the thing that makes everyone fucking fall in love with him. Besides him being fucking Ken Kobashi, it's this rivalry he has, and this obstacle, this mountain that he climbs, that is Stan Hansen.
And I think it's something that you look at how Hansen got himself to that point, and a lot of that is Hansen and just the particulars of Stan Hansen, the fact that he was always there, that he was always kept strong, that he was so different from everyone else that no matter what, like Kawada versus Hansen, it just visually you like go like, okay, you have this constant just struggle, and like the idea of him as the gatekeeper to the pillars or the six pillars, it rings so true, because you have this guy that maybe maybe Baba missed the handoffs, as you're saying, but you always have someone that, if it's not the big handoff, getting over Hansen before you get to the Triple Crown, before Champion Carnival, before like doing this, he's always kept strong, and he's always perfect for that. This is something that I never really sort of consider, the idea that maybe Stan Hansen is the greatest gatekeeper of all time.
I think so.
Because like when you look at the rest of this, we're not saying this about like Hiroki Goto. Like he's okay, whatever. But Stan Hansen is like that mark that if you don't get past Stan,
it's not even just for the pillars. It's also for like Gordy. It's also for Dr. Dusty Williams. It's also for like, and he teams with so many guys that he, just by teaming with them, he elevates them into a higher position in the company. So being like his tag team partner is like, it's like a stamp of approval from Baba. It's also like to the other guys, to the fans. They're like, oh shit, Stan Hansen's teaming with this guy. He must be something special. And we'll talk about his various tag teams that are like, I have my favorites. We'll talk about them when we talk about his accolades here. But now we're gonna get into the title history. But before we get into the title history, are there any pressing points you want to make about Stan Hansen, Mike?
I think the thing that when you think about Stan Hansen, you have to think about someone who carved his own path, because we've talked all about how he does, I believe, 113 tours for All Japan from 82 to 2000. And for a period of that, it's not just that he is doing these tours. He's someone that, at least from the way that he speaks of it, he goes to Japan and in a lot of ways learns to like make it his second home. Like his second wife is a native. He has children that are half American, half Japanese, or dual nationals. That he does this, and you don't hear that without anyone else. I mean, I can't think of very many people who have kind of cut the path that he did. And it's something that I get kind of sad thinking of that. Like he's no longer doing he's no longer PWF commissioner, or like during COVID, he was not like showing up and doing declarations, because he is like the living vestige of like this life and this era. And I think when you start talking about the 1990s and especially the 80s with All Japan, like after you list the pillars, after you list Akiyama, it inevitably comes to Hansen, and for a reason.
And listen, we're gonna do next one after this. Biography is gonna be Jumbo, and I'll throw my flowers at Jumbo because I love Jumbo so much. But if you're gonna talk about the guy who is more important to the pillars than even Jumbo was, I'm gonna say it was Stan Hansen. Let's talk about his title run. I'm gonna run through everything that's listed on Cage Match here. WCWA Texas Tag Team Championship, one time with Killer Tim Brooks. He was the NWF World Heavyweight Champion for the New Japan Pro Wrestling for one time. I think against Inoki. I think he won the belt from Inoki. The National Wrestling Alliance United States Champion one time. World Tag Team Champion one time with Ole Anderson. National Tri-State North American Championship one time. The NWA Georgia Heavyweight Championship twice. He was NWA Georgia Tag Team Championship 2 times, both with Tommy Rich, interestingly enough. AWA, he was the AWA International Heavyweight Champion, which I don't recall that particular title.
AWA International Heavyweight Champion.
Not the World Heavyweight Champion, because it's listed. Right. He had both of these belts, but I don't recall the International Heavyweight Championship. And this was something they gave to Larry Zbyszko as a placeholder. Because
Hey,
Larry Zbyszko was the son-in-law of Vergnick.
yeah. This is we're not letting you have the real belt. That's going to Nikki. Here you go.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. NWA International Tag Team Champion, one time with Ron Bass. And now we're going to get into the All Japan era. But before the Triple Crown, he's the PWF, the Pacific Wrestling Federation World Tag Team title 3 times, once with Ted DiBiase. One of my favorite tag teams with Hansen is the team he has with Ted DiBiase, because I think it's a perfect complement of a technical wrestler with a big, wild brawler.
Oh yeah, and it's something that is so different from most of his other tag teams, because like what we'll say about Gordy and Brody, that's not Ted DiBiase, especially of that time period.
No, it is such. If you have a chance to see the team of DiBiase and Hansen working together in All Japan, please go out of your way to find the matches they are out there. It is such a great tag team. Of course, one time with, of course, Bruiser Brody, and one time, interestingly enough, with Austin Idol of all people. It's just I haven't seen the tag team matches of Austin Idol and Hansen. I kind of want to go look for them right now.
I feel like that is the same situation as Ted DiBiase, but for completely different reasons. It's not necessarily a compliment thing. It's just like, okay, this is what we're working with today. Oh, wait, now we're champions.
He is the Pacific Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Champion 4 times. He is the NWA International Heavyweight Champion 1 time. The NWA United National Champion 1 time. These are, of course, the 3 belts that would become the Triple Crown. He is the All Japan Unified World Tag Team Champion 8 times. Like 8 times with Gary Albright once, which is a great tag team. Like,
yeah, I like.
What a team.
I'm a Gary Albright head. I think he is really kind of like, we live in the worst universe because we did not get to see Gary Albright really take off the way he could have.
I think Baba was going to push this guy to the moon if he didn't have his health problems.
Right.
Once with Danny Spivey, a great tag team of 2 incredibly large men. Danny Spivey is fucking frightening to watch in All Japan, especially because he's teaming with someone as with the status of Stan Hansen.
Yeah, because like outside of Baba, who is as tall as Spivey regularly on those shows? Like it's like no one else. Everyone else is looking up to him.
Yeah, and I will. This is my hot take. I like the team with Hansen more than I like the Skyscrapers.
You know what? Okay, I see you on that, WH. I see your logic. Yeah, no.
Twice with Terry Gordy. 3 times with Tenryu, amazing, and once with Ted DiBiase. I think, outside of like the 4 pillars, the person I associate the most with the World Tag Team Championship in All Japan is Stan Hansen.
And I think it's something that, I mean, you've listed it off. When I think about like tag team wrestlers, you often, like nowadays, at least modern tag team wrestlers, it's always as a unit and as a group. I like thinking back about the people that you were able to like throw into, like, I like Bobby Eaton. Bobby Eaton was someone that is known as like one of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time. And it's throughout like different combinations of Midnight Express and then other tag teams with it. And for me, I look at like all the different combinations that, all the different versions of teams that Stan Hansen had. And it's so much like just like variety. And it's a variety in big guys too, because Gary Albright, vastly different wrestler than you would see from Bruiser Brody, who's a vastly different wrestler than Terry Gordy. And it's just one of those things that I've never truly like stepped it out, but there's probably an argument that for his style and for like his versatility, Stan Hansen might be one of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time.
I can't argue that. I think if you watch any World Tag Team title match that he has with any of his partners against like Kobashi and Misawa, Kawada and Taue, or like even like what's really fun is like watching him like team with Spivey and DiBiase and whoever against the Miracle Violence Connection, who were like the dominant foreign tag team of Gordy and Williams. Is like, and what's great about that dynamic is you can see Gordy and Williams really want to take that spot from Hansen.
Oh yeah.
as a collective, like together, we're gonna destroy Hansen. Like legit, I feel like they were like, okay, we need to reach his level. We need to beat him. We need to show that we can hang with him in
Mhm.
these matches. And you can see they're just trying so hard to claw their way into Hansen's position. And but Hansen is like, fuck you. This is my spot. You're not going to take it away from me. It's so fun to watch any combination of Hansen and whoever he's teaming with at the time against Gordy and Williams.
Oh yeah, and it's something that when I'm thinking about tag team partners of Hansen, like it it is so unique, the ability of having the variety and then the matchups that you have the chemistry with. Like absolutely, when you talk about Gordy and Williams, and it it's not just like subtext; it's played out like just this competition to be the best. And Hansen is all about that. He talks about like the reason why the his overall wrestling thesis that he has as of 2011 about like what is changing in wrestling, and what draws it to him is the competition. And whenever he like talks about people that he enjoyed dishing it out with, it's like, to me, I felt like they got the competition too. And you, it just worked in a way that you were able to have all these very different combinations that just worked out naturally. And it's one of those things that at the end of the day, with Baba and how 90s All Japan was, like, missed handoffs, yes, but like having the ability then to just be able to like, okay, Stan Hansen is almost cement in a way, and it's time to have more people just take a run at Stan Hansen, and it's just a beautiful formula to see play out each time.
It is, and finally, we're gonna list his Triple Crown title wins. He's been Triple Crown champion 4 times. He won it first time. He wins against Terry Gordy. He then subsequently loses it back to Terry Gordy. He wins against in a decision match against Mitsuharu Masao because Gordy has his drug problems and he has to vacate the title. And then from there he loses it to Jumbo Tsuruta. From Jumbo Tsuruta, he wins the title from Jumbo again. He loses it to Masawa, and then he wins it from Toshiaki Kawada, and he loses it again for the final time to Masawa. This is also the point where, like, okay, Kawada cannot beat Masawa at this point in time. So
Yeah.
Hansen's it's interesting because Hansen is really placed in a lot of ways as like the buffer between Kawada and Masawa, and Kawada getting that win against Masawa. And like, okay, we want to kind of protect, Kawada from Masawa to some extent. So we're going to have him be like the transition from, Masawa to Kawada and vice versa sometimes.
Yeah, it's something that like when like we think about Stan Hansen and the position he played there, like the ability to be this glue figure. And I think that that's something that you couldn't really have like you could have Jun Akiyama be like the glue person or be a kind of a transition person. It kind of had to be a certain kind of role that you're able to play off of, and you're able to still have the matchups, and you're able to go like, okay, we are going to go from Hansen can be here. And when you think about his triple crown runs, he only has it's not a long time combined. It is really preparing for the next champion and getting it to that point. And I think that being the intermediary between Masawa and Quad is kind of perfect. It's kind of the perfect example of that role.
It is. And yeah, and we'll wrap it up there. But I do recommend, like, if you want to get a great guide to his Stan Hansen's greatest matches, like, just go to Cage Match, go to like the match guide, like click on the rating, like and it will give you a listing of his greatest matches. And I would watch these in order that they're number one is actually the Tsuruta Yatsu versus Tenryu Hansen match from the 89 Real World Tag League Finals. This is this is a perfect tag match, Mike. Like this match.
Yeah, it's insane the fact that, and I don't have the observers of this time, that it was only 3.5 stars. Like, it's listed as that, but it's such a absolute blast of a tag match, and super physical storytelling, just working it off and getting it to that point. And then like Saruta's hot tag in it is
phenomenal. My God.
It's
just
otherworldly.
a thing of beauty. The July 29th, 1993 match against Kenta Kobashi, where he nearly decapitates Kobashi, who's sitting on the turnbuckle as the finish. What an amazing finish! Probably one of the greatest finishes in the history of professional wrestling, Mike.
And I just love the fact that, and as a former film archivist, I care about these kind of things. I love the way that like the lens flare and the light glare come in for that match. It is something special. Like just like catching it, especially like at that time. It is just like Budokan with the lights of that and with the film stock. And maybe it is the third or fourth generation version of it that I saw at that time. It was kind of magical.
Number 3 is December 16th, 1988. Tenryu and Kawada, a young Kawada, and
Feisty Kawada
against Hansen and Gordy, and this is the famous match where Hansen and Gordy just destroy Kawada's leg and really put Kawada on a map with the fans to become the sympathetic guy that they're gonna start getting behind.
Yeah, I know Kawada and Misawa have like their trials and tribulations, but do we think like 5% of his crankiness came from December 16th, 1988? Because I could believe it.
Maybe, but he's always had a good relationship with Stan Hansen, like Kawada.
Yeah,
he hated Steve Williams, legit, but I think he's always had a grudging, not even grudging. I think he's always had respect and liked Stan Hansen because it's like this guy helped put me over, actually helped get me to a next level in this company that maybe he wouldn't necessarily have achieved with anyone else. But that's a great match. It's like if you want to see how to get sympathy, how to get heat in a tag team match on one person's body, portion of their body, watch 12, 16, 88. And then the final two running out the top 5 are September 4th, 91 and September 5th, 96, both against Kenta Kobashi. Would you say Stan Hansen's greatest rivalry in Japan was against Kenta Kobashi?
I think it's like the natural thing to kind of go to just because Hansen was almost at like his apex, like every beat around Kobashi's ascent and like Kobashi's young boy status, like throughout it. And then finally Kobashi becoming the megastar and one of the 5 most talented wrestlers of all time, in my opinion, based around that. I always really enjoyed him with Kobashi, and I struggle to think of someone at least out of the pillars. Like I like the chemistry that him and Kawada have, but I think Kobashi's the bigger rival.
I think so. I would totally say that Kobashi, Vader and Sting, Kobashi Hansen,
Oh yeah,
there's a similar dynamic going on there, I think.
Yeah, same vibe, as the kids would say.
So I think that's going to bring us to the end of our discussion about Stan Hansen. I had a blast, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, for sure, it's my pleasure. WH, I love talking about wrestling history, and seriously, The Last Outlaw. It is one of the more interesting wrestling books you'll come across, and really the one person who can kind of give perspective of a really tumultuous time in pro wrestling, like Stan Hansen did. Because like Forrest Gump, he was there the entire time, and it's a fascinating book and a lot of kind of cool stories about him and Brody going out partying, and that was always a thing. Is like him and Pete Roberts. Like I've never really had much of an opinion of Pete Roberts as a wrestler, but he must be the best guy ever.
Pete Roberts, people don't know, is a British wrestler that Stan Hansen became friends with in New Japan, I believe.
Right.
And then Pete Roberts stayed in New Japan, but like Hansen was like jumped to All Japan. But they stayed friends, but they had to keep it really secret because they were working for rival companies when time with kayfabe, especially in Japan, was like alive and well, so they could not be seen together in public.
Oh, for sure.
But like he'll say, like Stan Hansen just puts Pete Roberts over big time. My favorite story, as my final thing, Mike, my favorite story in that book is the story about Harley Race not getting on the bus because he wants to eat his breakfast. And this is Harley Race, NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Guy's got a lot of stroke. Baba's All Japan is an NWA affiliate. Mm-hmm. They need the touring world champion to come over there. Baba never books him again after that because he held up the bus because he wanted to eat breakfast.
You get there 10 minutes early. You get there 10 minutes. Or it's a story as old as time is foreigners not understanding that when they say like you need to be there on time, you need to be there on time. And
Hansen, because Hansen is from his perspective, he has no sympathy for Harley. He likes
yeah,
Harley, but he has no sympathy. He's like, yeah, you held up everyone else. You should have been there, like we all were. And
yeah.
and he has no sympathy for Harley. And I'm sure he has a lot of fondness for Harley and he likes him. But it's like, hey, when you're in Japan, that's the thing. He is a gatekeeper for the other foreigners to come to Japan. This is how you behave here, and
Mhm.
this is what I expect you to. But how do you conduct yourself on the bus, at the hotels, at the buildings?
I think every single one of those GCW kids somehow they get booked in like doing a DDT shot. We just need to just as a public service send them a copy on Kindle of The Last Outlaw. They'll
No,
have
you
time
know
on
what
the
they
plane to
need?
read.
We need to send them we need to send them a copy of the contract that Joe Higuchi gave to every American wrestler of how to conduct yourself in All Japan Pro
Oh,
Wrestling while you're on tour.
absolutely. The competition is going to be strong and keen, but you get on that bus and don't wear gym clothes in the lobby. Like just like I don't know if this is a saying that ever made it up to Canada, but Mama Spears' like favorite thing to say to me when I was a kid was, "Were you born in a barn?" Like essentially, that's what Joe Higuchi was like telling these pro wrestlers. Like, come on, guys, you're guests. Like, put on pants.
Yeah,
Don't drink beer.
you're representing this company, which has a very high standing in the public eye in Japan here. So please look like professionals, please. Like the whole thing about like Baba won't that didn't like people like wearing like polo shirts out of untucked of their jeans. It's like every one of you put your jeans put your polo shirts into your jeans. That was a very big thing, and then Akiyama broke the mold with that apparently. So.
I mean, Akiyama, he just wanted to be able to let his shirt tail fly, and no one is going to stop
Literally,
him. Yeah.
literally, metaphorically, and literally here. Mike, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you again.
If people want to find more of your work, please tell them where they can find you.
So, as WH very nicely plugged me up top, I am a part of Open the Voice Gate with Case Low. We have been going in various forms in our coverage of the Dragon system since 2016. We've been doing it for a while, and we actually are coming off of one of our bigger times of the year. Dragon Gate has their biggest annual show, Kobe Pro Wrestling Festival, in July. It was the second this year. If you're looking to check out some stuff, one of the favorite shows that Case and I did about 3 weeks ago. It's up on the Open the Voice Gate podcast feed, and you can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. We need to figure out our Blue Sky and Threads future, but that's the best way to do this. But we have this episode with the English, the official voice of Dragon Gate for English listeners, Jay Church. 3-hour long episode. If you like kind of tangents and the stuff that WH and I got into, then I would love for y'all to check out that episode.
Let me tell you something, folks. I listened to this episode because Dylan Fox over at the Eastern Laird was putting it over big time. And like, not that I don't listen to your shows. It's just like, I pick and choose sometimes, Mike. But like Dylan was like just talking about it on Twitter. I'm like, okay, this sounds interesting. So I downloaded it. I'm telling you, from like 5 minutes in, I am fucking howling at the things being revealed on this podcast. Like, if you want to know, seriously, if you want to know about the inner workings, not just of Dragon Gate, of the entire pro wrestling industry in Japan, you must listen to this episode of Open the Voice Gate with Mike Caslow and Jay Church from the Eagles commentator for the Dragon Gate promotion.
Hey, if you want to figure out what the deal with Masato Yoshino nowadays is, that's just one thing that we talk about on that show. But yeah, just follow us at Open Voice Gate. I am on social media on Twitter, Fuji Heya. I'm trying to get everything sorted, but as Spears Ovations, where I do a lot of just wrestling streaming as well. But Open the Voice Gate and Spears Ovations is where you can go and check me out. And thank you again for having me.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say again, like, if you want to know about just get great analysis of just pro wrestling in general, like Mike's a great person to follow on social media, not just of Dragon Gate, but just like anything. He watches it all and he can talk about it all, like as you could pretty much figured out from an hour and a half of us talking here.
I mean, I'm like the rare person that Chris Jericho versus Commander scratches a certain itch in my brain, and I go like, yes, I have to go and see this right now. So thank you so much for the kind words.
Yes. So Mike, you'll come back in the future to do a match review.
Absolutely.
We'll get a match out of you. Maybe something from the 80s. Maybe if you want to go there, maybe we'll do. If I don't think I've done the 89 Real World Tag League Finals. Maybe we'll save that for you.
Oh yeah.
But we'll see. But
we'll see how that goes.
We'll see how it goes. We'll see.
But for sure.
And for sure, check out Mike's work over at over at Voices of Wrestling. You can check me out. MCU later. I'm going to be covering like about 4 shows for the G1 for Post Wrestling, including the finals this summer. My God, I have to wake up early to watch these shows and then go to work and then come back to record them with various people here at Post Wrestling, Mike.
I am happy as someone who is focused on Dragon Gate as like my primary beat. That was my June. My June was getting all this stuff together for Dragon Gate and Kobe World coverage. Now I'm at a point where it's like G1. I'll go back and I can revisit it now.
You go.
Like it is something that for me that has sometimes not covering the biggest promotion in a country pays off in a way. Now
I think so.
Just sit back.
I think so. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I'm looking forward to the people I'm going to be talking with. Eric Marcotte, Karen Peterson, John Pollock, and others, and it'll be fun. But check those out over at I believe there'll be Patreon shows on the Post Wrestling Cafe. So please subscribe if you want to hear those. But until next time, for Mike Spears, I'm WH Park, and we will see you next time. And until then, goodbye.